Evan Reed had 17 missed calls he never returned. He told himself it could wait. 12 hours later, he was standing in a hospital corridor staring at his father on a ventilator, and his uncle already had paperwork in his hands like a man claiming a future that was not his. Evan arrived late, judged on sight, treated like the family failure. Then his dying father whispered one thing that did not make sense. A brown envelope. A building. Only for Evan, and the moment his uncle realized what was inside, the air changed. Because this was not about grief anymore. It was about control, and Evan was one signature away from losing everything his father hid to protect him. Evan Reed still had dried coffee on his shirt when the hospital corridor swallowed him whole. The lights were too white, too clean, like the building had scrubbed emotion out of the air. A nurse he had never met stood in front of him with a clipboard held tight to her chest, her voice careful, professional, almost gentle. She told him his father had come out of a critical episode during the night. She said it the way people say a storm passed, like the danger had moved on, but the wreckage was still there. Evan did not even know his father had been admitted. The smell of antiseptic climbed into his throat and made him swallow hard. He felt it like a hand. He felt the floor under him too solid, like if he moved wrong he might crack something. 12 hours earlier, he had been in the apartment garage, arguing with a security guard about a notice on his windshield. An overdue fee. A threat to tow. Evan had raised his voice. His pulse had chased a stupid piece of paper like it was a personal insult. He remembered the guard's face, bored and unmoved. He remembered himself sounding like a man fighting the world and losing. While he was yelling about a fine, his father was 20 minutes away by car, lying on a hospital bed, trying to breathe through pain that he thought he could outlast. The nurse asked if he was Robert Reed's son. Evan nodded, and it felt like his head belonged to someone else. He asked if his father was okay. The nurse hesitated, just a fraction too long. That pause landed in his stomach like a stone. She said his father was still being monitored closely. The doctor wanted Evan to go in and see him, a polite sentence that sounded like a warning. Evan walked behind her through the corridor, past doors that were all shut tight, past people moving fast like time mattered to them. Wheels rolled over tile. Shoes squeaked. Voices murmured and died. His hands trembled, so he shoved them into his jacket pockets and pretended he was simply cold. The last time he saw his father was 3 months ago at a dinner that felt like a chore. They talked about weather, gas prices, nothing. Evan avoided the real topic the way he avoided everything that could demand a version of him he did not know how to become. His father had watched him with a quiet tiredness that Evan hated because it made him feel like a disappointment without anyone saying the word. Evan knew the look people gave him. A man in his 30s, divorced, unstable jobs, always talking about the next plan. Always one step away from getting it together. Always one step away from proving he was not a problem. He had lived inside that look long enough that it became a kind of climate. Uncomfortable, constant. Something he pretended not to notice. The nurse stopped at a room. She opened the door, and the sound inside hit Evan first. Beeping. Steady. Mechanical. Like a heartbeat that did not trust the body to do its own work. Robert Reed lay on the bed, smaller than Evan remembered. Pale under the lights. A tube along his cheek. The skin around his eyes thin, like the years had finally taken their payment. Evan stepped to the edge of the bed and stopped. He did not touch him. He was afraid of how fragile his father looked. Afraid that one touch could make the truth collapse. "Dad," Evan said, and his own voice disgusted him. It sounded young, lost, like he had arrived at the wrong address. Robert's eyes opened slowly. The gaze wandered for a second, then focused. When he saw Evan, his eyes filled with water before his mouth moved at all. He tried to lift his hand. Evan grabbed it quickly, like catching something falling. His father's hand was cold and light as paper. "You came," Robert whispered through oxygen, his voice thin, breaking around the mask. Evan nodded too many times like his body was trying to make up for something with motion. He said he was here. He repeated it, as if repetition could erase the hours he wasted being angry over nothing, but the truth sat between them, heavy and undeniable. He had not been here when it mattered. In the corner of the room, a man stood with his arms crossed, posture straight, suit crisp, eyes sharp. Ray, Robert's younger brother. The kind of man who looked like he belonged in places where decisions got made. The kind of man Evan always felt too messy to stand beside. Ray's gaze moved from Evan's dirty shoes to his wrinkled shirt, to his uncombed hair. It was a single scan that carried years of judgment. Late again. Still the same. Evan felt heat rise in his face, not sure if it was shame or anger, but it burned either way. Robert squeezed Evan's fingers weakly, like he was trying to anchor him. He tried to speak, but coughing took over, shaking his whole body. Ray stepped in instantly. He adjusted pillows, called a nurse, moved with an efficiency that looked like competence and control. To anyone watching, Ray seemed like the dependable one. The one who belonged. Evan stepped back half a step without meaning to, like he always did. But when the coughing eased, Robert's eyes searched for Evan first. Not the nurse, not Ray. Evan saw something there that did not match the story he had believed about himself. It was not disappointment, it was hope. And in that moment, none of them understood what that hope meant. None of them knew that the man standing there with coffee stains on his shirt was about to learn a truth that would flip the power in that room. None of them knew that the person who had been treated like a failure was holding a life that was about to change, and the real danger was not the machines in that room. It was the man in the corner, already thinking in signatures. Evan did not remember walking out of the office, but he remembered the sound of the front door closing behind Ray. It was not a slam, it was worse. It was controlled, a deliberate click that said the conversation was finished because Ray decided it was finished. Evan stayed in the room for a long time with the brown envelope under his palm. The sunlight on the desk looked ordinary, almost insulting. Outside, cars passed, neighbors lived. Life pretended nothing had shifted. Inside, Evan's chest felt like it was holding two weights at once. Grief for his father, and fear of what his father had just put in his hands. He finally moved when his phone buzzed again. Not a call. A notification that felt like a tap on the shoulder from the past. He unlocked the screen and stared. 17 missed calls. The timestamp cluster sat there like a bruise, most of them from the same number, his father's, spaced across a single afternoon and evening, each one unanswered. Then 2 calls from a hospital number. Then one final missed call that came in after midnight. Evan's throat tightened. He had checked his phone yesterday. He had told himself there were no missed calls, no messages, nothing. But now he saw the truth. His phone had been in Do Not Disturb. He had switched it on without thinking, the way he did whenever his life felt loud. He had been in a mood about the parking notice, about being treated like he did not matter, and he had shut the world out like a childish punishment. His father had been trying to reach him while he was busy proving a point to no one. Evan pressed his thumb against the call log and felt a wave of nausea rise. He scrolled slowly, as if scrolling might change what he saw. 17 missed calls meant 17 chances to pick up. 17 chances to be the son who showed up. He did not. He sat down in his father's chair and let his head drop forward for a moment, eyes burning. He told himself not to cry. He told himself he had already cried enough, but his body did not care what he told it. His breathing turned uneven. His face tightened. It was not only the missed calls, it was everything those calls represented. A man in his 30s who still ran from difficult conversations. A son who treated his father like a problem he could postpone. A life where the people who loved him learned to expect disappointment and then acted like they were simply being realistic. Evan wiped his face with the back of his hand and forced himself to look at the details. There was a voicemail icon next to the last call. One voicemail, left at 12:17 in the morning. The time hit him hard. He pictured his father in a hospital bed under the same white lights, struggling for air, and still reaching for his phone, still pressing his son's name into the screen with hands that were already weakening. Evan did not press play right away. His finger hovered, shaking. He was afraid of what he would hear, afraid the message would be an accusation, afraid it would be a goodbye that made everything irreversible. He pressed play anyway. At first, there was only hospital noise in the background. A distant beep, a faint shuffle. Then his father's voice, thin and strained, but unmistakable. "Evan, it is Dad. If you are hearing this, it means you did not answer again. I am not mad. I am tired. Listen to me. This is important." Evan squeezed his eyes shut. His father continued. Each word sounded like it cost him. "I did not tell you about the hospital because I knew you would panic or you would avoid it. Maybe both. I should have told you anyway. That part is on me. But Evan, you have to stop letting other people decide your life for you. You've been doing it so long you think it is normal. It is not." Evan felt heat behind his eyes. He heard his father's breaths between sentences, the struggle hidden beneath the calm tone. "Your Uncle Ray will try to help. He will say it is for your own good. He will sound reasonable. He will make you feel small. He has been doing that to you since you were a kid. I let him. I thought it kept the family steady. I was wrong." Evan's chest tightened like a fist. The voice continued, more urgent now, as if his father sensed time shrinking. "There is an envelope in my desk. Brown, thick. It is for you, only you. Do not let Ray touch it. Do not sign anything he puts in front of you. Not today, not tomorrow. Do not sign. If you sign, you will lose it, and you will lose yourself with it." Evan gripped the edge of the desk. His knuckles turned white. He felt the envelope under his other hand like a living thing. His father's voice softened for a second. "I know you think you are the family mistake. You are not. You are late sometimes. You are scared sometimes. But you still have a heart, and you still have a chance. This is my last chance to make sure you use it." Then the voice got quieter, like he was turning his head away, and Evan heard a faint murmur, a nurse, maybe Ray, someone telling Robert to rest. Robert's voice returned, smaller. "If I do not get to say it in person, I am proud of you for trying, even when you fail. But you have to stay this time. You have to stay when it gets hard. Promise me you will stay." The message ended with a soft click and a hollow silence. Evan stared at the screen like it had become something else. His father had spoken to him from the edge of death and still did not sound angry, not once. He sounded like a man trying to pull his son onto solid ground before the water rose too high. Evan replayed the voicemail once more, then a third time, as if repetition could stitch the words into his bones. Each time he heard the same warning, the same plea, the same truth. Ray was not just managing grief, he was managing power. Evan sat very still. The house around him felt different now. Not only quiet, but charged, like a wire humming behind the walls. He looked at the brown envelope again. His father had not simply left him a gift. He had left him a test, a line in the sand, a chance to finally choose something and endure the consequences. Evan stood up. His legs felt unsteady, but he stood anyway. He opened the desk drawer again, slower this time, careful. The envelope was still there, thick and heavy, waiting. Evan slid it out and held it with both hands. He was grieving. He was scared. He was still the man who had ignored 17 calls, but he was also the man his father had chosen, and now he had proof his father had seen Ray clearly. Evan took a breath and turned his head toward the hallway, listening. Somewhere in the house, there was movement. A quiet step, a door shifting. Ray had not left for long. The sound was small, but Evan heard it because his whole body had turned into a sensor. A footstep in the hallway, then another, light, measured, as if whoever moved wanted to be heard only if they decided to be heard. Evan held the envelope against his chest for a second like a shield. His pulse thudded in his ears. The voicemail still echoed inside him. Do not sign. Do not let Ray touch it. He set the envelope back on the desk, not because he wanted to obey Ray, but because he did not want his hands to shake when he opened it. He wanted to see clearly. He wanted control, even if it was only control over his own breathing. He heard Ray stop outside the office door. Evan spoke first, forcing his voice steady. You forgot something. Ray stepped in. His expression was polite, almost warm, like the earlier confrontation had not happened. That shift was its own kind of threat. I came back to make sure you are not doing something foolish, Ray said. You are exhausted. You are alone in here with a dead man's papers. That is not a state to make decisions. Evan looked at him and thought of the voicemail. Ray will sound reasonable. He will make you feel small. Ray's eyes dropped to the desk, to the envelope. Evan saw the micro change. A slight tightening at the corner of Ray's mouth. A flicker of focus. You opened it yet? Ray asked. Evan did not answer immediately. He let the silence stretch long enough to make the room uncomfortable. Ray filled it smoothly. Look, Evan, we both loved your father. This is not a competition. He was not perfect. He made emotional choices sometimes. You and I both know he worried about you. Evan kept his gaze steady. He called me 17 times, Evan said. Ray paused, just a beat. And you did not answer, Ray said softly, as if he was sympathizing. That is exactly my point. You disappear when life demands you. You shut things down. You shut people out. That is why I need to handle this transition, until you are stable. Evan felt anger rise, hot and sharp. Ray had just turned Evan's biggest shame into an argument for taking control. Evan said you were on the phone with a lawyer in the hospital. I heard you. Ray did not flinch. He did not deny it. Of course I was, Ray said. That is what you do when someone is dying. You prepare. You protect the family. Evan leaned forward slightly. Protect, Evan repeated, or position yourself. Ray's smile thinned. Do not twist this, Ray said. You are grieving. Grief makes people paranoid. Evan's hands curled against the desk edge. He felt the tremor in his fingers and hated it. Ray always noticed weakness like a predator notices movement. Ray stepped closer, voice lowering. I'm going to say this once, Ray said. If your father left you something significant, it will become a problem. Not because I want it to, but because reality will force it. Banks, taxes, tenants, insurance, liability. If you mishandle one thing, you could be personally sued. Do you understand what that means? It means your life can be destroyed in months. Evan swallowed. The fear was real because the threat was real. But the voicemail had changed something. Fear was no longer a reason to surrender. Ray slid the folder forward again, the one with the prepared papers. Sign, Ray said. Temporary. It keeps you safe. Evan glanced at the signature line and pictured the ink like a chain. He looked back up. My father said, do not sign anything you put in front of me, Evan said. Ray's eyes sharpened just for a second, then the calm returned. Your father said many things, Ray replied. In pain, under medication, half awake. You cannot build your future on a whisper. Evan felt his throat tighten. It was not a whisper, Evan said. It was a choice. Ray's posture changed slightly. He stood straighter. His tone cooled. Evan, Ray said, if you insist on doing this alone, I will have to take steps. I can petition for a review of capacity. I can request an injunction to freeze assets until the court decides what is valid. That is not a threat, it is a safeguard. Safeguard. The word tasted like metal. Evan stared at his uncle and realized this was not about helping him cope. This was about controlling the narrative. If Ray could frame Evan as unstable, grieving, irresponsible, then Ray could frame himself as the only responsible option. Evan reached for the envelope. Ray's eyes followed his hand instantly. Evan said quietly, "You want to see what is inside." Ray did not answer. He did not have to. Evan slid a finger under the seal and opened it slowly, not dramatic, not rushed. He pulled out the first pages. Ownership documents, legal, sealed, a commercial property in the downtown core, the address printed clean, the valuation not written in numbers but implied by the location alone, and the name on the title unmistakable. Evan Reed. Ray went still. The silence was not empty now. It was heavy, loaded, dangerous. Ray's voice came out controlled, but the control sounded strained. "That cannot be correct," Ray said. Evan turned one page, then another. There were supporting documents, correspondence with a law firm, a management agreement, and a letter in his father's handwriting. The ink darker where the pen had pressed harder. Evan read the first line and felt his chest clamp tight. "If you are reading this, I am gone. If Ray is standing near you, do not let him speak for me." Evan lifted his eyes. Ray had gone pale, just slightly, like a man realizing the room had changed ownership. Ray spoke quickly, as if speed could regain power. "This will be challenged," Ray said. "I can make calls. I can stop this from being finalized. You do not understand what you are stepping into." Evan's voice came out low. "Neither did you," Evan said. Ray stared at him, and for the first time Evan saw something raw behind the polished suit and steady gaze. Not grief, fear. Because this envelope was not just a transfer of property. It was a transfer of authority, a direct statement from Robert Reed that Ray was not the man to trust. Ray reached toward the papers. Evan pulled them back. "Do not touch it," Evan said. Ray stopped his hand mid-air, then let it fall slowly, as if he had never intended to reach at all. "We need to talk to the lawyer," Ray said, forcing calm back into his tone. "We need to do this properly. As a family." Evan looked down at his father's handwriting again, then at Ray. "No," Evan said, "we need to do this truthfully." Ray's jaw tightened. He stepped back half a step, the same half step Evan used to take, and Evan realized something that made the room feel even colder. Ray had been preparing for Robert to die, but he had not been preparing for Robert to choose Evan. "If you want, I will continue with Chapter 5 and Chapter 6 next, and I will keep the same pacing, voice-over flow, and evidence-driven escalation." Ray did not wait for grief to settle. He waited for the moment Evan looked tired enough to agree to anything just to stop feeling lost. That moment came the next morning in Robert's office, when the house still smelled faintly of his father's aftershave and dust warmed by sunlight. Evan stood by the desk with the brown envelope under his palm like it could run away. He had barely slept. His eyes felt gritty. His head felt swollen from crying he refused to admit happened. Ray walked in like he owned the room. No knock, no hesitation, suit pressed, voice calm. "We need to handle this correctly," Ray said. "Family meeting, lawyer present, everything clean." Evan stared at him. The word clean made something in him tighten. Clean was what Ray always wanted. Clean meant controlled. Clean meant Evan being moved to the side. "Evan said Dad told me this is for me." Ray nodded, as if he was indulging a child. He kept his voice low, measured, like a man teaching someone how reality works. "Your father was on heavy medication. He was not in a stable condition. Decisions made in that state can be challenged. If you push this the wrong way, you will tear the family apart and end up with nothing." Evan felt the old reflex rise. The urge to step back. To let Ray steer. To tell himself it was better if someone competent drove. Ray continued, gentle and cruel at the same time. You are grieving. You are exhausted. You do not know what you are holding. Taxes, tenants, compliance, repairs. That is not something you learn overnight. You will drown. Drown. The word landed hard because Evan knew it was what people expected from him. He had drowned before, not in water, in choices, in responsibility. In the moment, things got serious. Ray moved closer and placed a folder on the desk. Inside were papers, already prepared, consent forms, temporary authority, a request for a family review, language that turned a private inheritance into a committee decision. Sign this, Ray said. It keeps things calm, it keeps things legal. It lets me manage the transition until you are stable. Evan stared at the signature line. His stomach rolled. He could almost feel the ink on his skin, the way it would mark him as the man who gave up again. Evan asked, "Why are you so ready?" Ray's expression barely changed, but his eyes sharpened. "Because someone has to be," Ray said. "Your father relied on me for years. He knew you. He loved you, but he knew you. He did not want you crushed by something you cannot carry." Evan heard the hidden message. Loved you, but not enough to trust you. Evan had believed that message for years. It was why he stayed small. It was why he accepted being treated like a problem. He looked at the room. The old desk. The scratch on the wood from when he was a kid. His father had not fixed it. He left it there like proof Evan existed even when he made mistakes. Evan said you were signing hospital paperwork before he even died. Ray gave a thin smile. "That is what adults do," he said. "They handle reality." Evan felt his throat tighten. He remembered the hospital corridor, the antiseptic, the beeping, his father's eyes searching for him. Hope. He was not ready, but he was done being treated like readiness was something other people granted him. Evan slid the folder back across the desk without touching a pen. "No," he said. Ray paused. Just a beat. It was the first crack, the first sign that Evan had stepped out of the role Ray had assigned him. Ray's voice stayed calm, but a cold edge appeared beneath it. "Do not make this harder," Ray said. "You think this is about pride. It is not. This is about protecting what your father built." Evan lifted his eyes. "Then why are you trying to take the decision away from him?" Evan asked. "He told me, only me. You were there. You heard it." Ray's jaw tightened. "He was confused," Ray said. "It is my job to make sure the family does not pay for an emotional mistake." Evan felt the insult in that sentence. It was not just about the building. It was about Evan being the emotional mistake. Ray leaned closer, voice lower now, almost intimate. "If you do not sign, you will force a legal fight you cannot afford. And when you lose, you will lose more than paperwork. You will lose what little respect you have left." There it was. The real weapon. Shame. Evan's hands shook. His body wanted to fold, but he looked at the envelope again. At the weight of it, at the fact that his father had chosen a moment to cut Ray out. Evan said, "If I lose, I lose. But I will not hand it over just because you think I am weak." Ray's eyes narrowed. The calm mask slipped slightly. "You are not built for this," Ray said. "You know that. I know that. Your father knew that." Evan swallowed. His voice came out rough. "Maybe I am not built for it," Evan said, "but he still chose me. And if you are right, then the consequences are mine, not yours." Silence pressed down. It was not the silence of grief. It was the silence of power shifting, 1 inch at a time. Ray stared at Evan like he was seeing him for the first time. Not the nephew who apologized. Not the man who asked for another chance. Someone standing still, trembling, but not stepping back. Ray picked up the folder. His smile returned, thin and controlled. "Fine," he said. "We do it the hard way." He turned toward the door, then stopped. "Just remember this," Ray said. "When it breaks, do not call me to fix it." Ray left. The room felt colder after him. Evan stood alone, palm on the envelope, heart pounding. Fear still alive. But something else now, too. Something he had not felt in years. He was not asking for permission anymore. Evan did not sleep that night. He sat at his father's kitchen table with the documents spread out like a map to a life he had never planned to enter. The house creaked in the dark the way old houses do, not scary, just alive, like it was adjusting to the absence of the man who used to fill it. The title transfer was real. The lawyer correspondence was real. The management agreement was real. Everything was dated, organized, and prepared long before the hospital. That mattered more than the value of the building. It meant this was not a last-minute emotional decision. It was a strategy, and that meant Ray had been wrong about one thing he never believed could be wrong. Robert Reed had seen him coming. Evan read his father's handwritten letter slowly, not because it was hard to understand, but because each sentence felt like it rewired his past. If you are reading this, I am gone. If Ray is standing near you, do not let him speak for me. Evan swallowed. Your uncle will tell you he has always handled the important things. He will tell you, I relied on him because you were unreliable. There is truth in that, but not the way he will use it. Evan's throat tightened. The letter did not flatter him. It did not pretend he had been perfect. That honesty made it hurt more, and somehow made it safer. I did rely on Ray. I let him become the voice in the room because it felt easier than confronting him. And I let that happen because I was afraid of conflict. I told myself it kept the family stable. It did. It also made you small. Evan leaned back in the chair, staring at the kitchen wall like the words were projected there. All those years he thought his father had simply agreed with Ray's judgment of him, but the letter sounded like regret, like an apology that was too late and still necessary. Ray does not control people with anger. He controls them with reason. He uses facts like ropes. He will wrap you in them until you think surrender is maturity. Evan thought of the hospital, the paperwork, the calm voice, the soft threats dressed up as protection. Facts like ropes. That was exactly it. I am leaving you the building because I need you to become someone who cannot be managed anymore. Not by Ray, not by your fear, not by your own shame. Evan felt the words hit deeper than he expected. Shame. His father named it plainly, like he had been watching it in Evan for years. There's more you do not know. You will feel betrayed when you learn it. You might even feel betrayed by me, but I am asking you to see the difference between love that protects and control that pretends to be love. Evan's eyes burned. He set the letter down for a moment and rubbed his face with both hands, palms pressing into his cheeks like he could push the heaviness out. Then he forced himself to keep reading. 2 years ago, I discovered discrepancies in the building's maintenance account. Small withdrawals at first, then larger ones, always justified as urgent repairs. I asked Ray to explain. He said he handled it. He said I should not worry. I believed him because I wanted to avoid a fight. Evan's stomach turned. So I did what I should have done earlier. I hired my own attorney. I hired an accountant. I kept records. I kept copies. I asked Carla to send reports to a private email Ray did not know existed. Evidence, receipts, the kind of practical proof that could survive in a world Ray liked to dominate. If Ray is reading this over your shoulder, he will tell you, I am paranoid. He will tell you, I am confused. I am not. I am clear. Evan looked down at the letter again, at the firm pressure in the handwriting. Clear. That word landed like a shield. The building is in your name, because the only way you will stop being the family problem is if you are forced to stop running from responsibility. You will want to sell it. That will be your first instinct. Do not yet. Meet Carla. Walk the floors. See what has been ignored. Fix what matters. Then decide. If you sell in fear, you will spend the rest of your life proving Ray right. Evan sat very still. His father had predicted him, predicted the exact shape of his weakness, and instead of shaming him for it, he had built a plan around it, like a father building a railing for a son who kept falling off the same stairs. The last lines were shorter, more personal, as if his father's composure had thinned. I know you think you have failed me. You have disappointed me sometimes, yes, but you have never embarrassed me the way you think you have. I am proud of your heart. I am proud that you still care when caring hurts. Now I need you to stay. Stay when Ray pressures you. Stay when you panic. Stay when you make mistakes. Because this time, you are not doing it to prove anything to the world. You are doing it to finally become yourself. Evan pressed his lips together hard. His eyes were wet, but his face was calm. Something inside him had settled into place. Not confidence, not peace, a decision. The next morning, he called the property management company using the number listed in the files. His voice came out rough when the receptionist answered. He introduced himself, owner of the downtown building, and asked to meet with Carla as soon as possible. There was a pause, then a change in the tone on the other end, a quick professionalism, a hint of surprise. Carla can see you today at 2, the receptionist said. Today. Not next week, not after a family meeting, not after Ray's permission. Today. Evan hung up and stared at his phone for a moment. Ray's threats about court petitions and injunctions still hovered in his mind, but the letter had given him something stronger than reassurance. It had given him a direction. He gathered the documents into a folder, added the handwritten letter on top, and drove to the city with his shoulders tense and his hands tight on the steering wheel. As he merged onto the highway, his phone lit up. Ray calling. Evan watched it ring, felt his body react with the old impulse to answer, to explain, to appease, to keep the peace. Then he heard his father's voice in his head, steady and quiet. Facts like ropes. Evan let it ring out. He did not feel brave. He felt terrified. But he stayed. The building looked taller in person than it had on paper. It rose from the downtown block like a tired old man wearing a suit that no longer fit, trying to look respectable while seams came apart at the edges. The glass in the lobby doors was smudged. The metal frame had scratches. The sign for the building's name hung slightly crooked, like someone had bumped it and no one cared enough to fix it. Evan stood on the sidewalk for a second, staring up. He felt the weight of ownership settle on his shoulders in a way that did not match his body. He still looked like a man who could be asked to leave, not like a man who could ask others to leave. He pushed the doors open anyway. The lobby smelled faintly of damp carpet and old cleaner. A fluorescent light buzzed overhead, uneven, and the air felt stale. Evan's gaze moved across the room, taking inventory the way his father's letter told him to. Small details. Neglect. Signs of a place that had been managed by someone who cared about control more than care. A woman stepped out from behind the small reception desk. Mid-50s, practical haircut, straight posture, eyes that had seen 1,000 promises and believed none of them until proven. "Carla," she said, extending her hand. "You must be Evan Reed." Evan shook her hand. Her grip was firm, the kind that said she worked with contractors and tenants, not theories. "Thank you for meeting me," Evan said. Carla's eyes swept over him, quick and professional, then returned to his face. She was polite, but Evan could see the question in her expression. This is the owner. He did not blame her. He had been asking himself the same thing. Carla gestured toward the elevator. She did not waste time with small talk. "I will show you what you inherited," she said. The elevator doors opened with a soft complaint. As they rose, Carla spoke fast, precise, like she had been holding this information in her mouth for too long and finally had permission to spit it out. Air conditioning on the third floor has been unstable for months. The design firm threatened to leave last quarter. They stayed because the previous owner promised repairs. Repairs never happened. Evan's stomach tightened. Previous owner, his father had been sick. Ray had been involved. Someone had been making promises and not keeping them. Carla continued, 2 tenants are behind on rent. One of them has a history, late payments, excuses, but they always catch up. The other one is new, and I do not like the pattern. They paid the first 3 months, then started slipping. We need to decide how strict we want to be. We. The word still hit Evan. He was not used to we. He was used to being told what would happen. The elevator opened on the second floor. The hallway carpet had a faint ripple near the wall where water had probably soaked and dried, leaving the floor uneven like a scar. Carla pointed without drama. That stain, she said. We had a leak last year. It was patched, not fixed. Patched, not fixed. Evan felt the phrase sink into his chest because it sounded like his own life. They walked the floors, flickering lights, peeling paint near vents. A fire extinguisher cabinet with a cracked glass pane, a stairwell door that did not close fully. Carla spoke with controlled frustration. We have been skating. That's the best word, skating. Things hold until they do not. Evan asked the question he had been avoiding since the letter. Why did my uncle have so much involvement, he asked. I was told he handled things. Carla's eyes did not widen, but Evan saw the smallest change. Recognition. Ray, she said slowly. Yes. He was the contact more often than your father in the last year. He preferred email. He preferred short replies. He approved almost everything, but he also delayed a lot. Delayed how? Evan asked. Carla stopped walking and looked at him directly. Maintenance requests, she said. Vendor invoices. There was always a reason. Budget, timing, waiting for a better quote. Then suddenly, once every few months, he would approve a large payment marked urgent, emergency repairs. Evan's throat tightened. Did you ever see the repairs? Evan asked. Carla's lips pressed together. Sometimes, she said. Sometimes not. Sometimes the vendor was paid and the problem was still there. I complained. I sent photos. I saved copies. The phrase made Evan's pulse jump. Do you still have them? Evan asked quietly. Carla looked at him for a second longer, as if measuring whether he was serious or just another temporary owner who would disappear. Then she nodded once. I keep everything, she said. Tenants lie, contractors lie, owners forget. Paper does not forget. They reached the third floor. Carla stopped outside the design firm's door, the one his father mentioned. Evan heard voices inside, creative energy, but under it he felt tension, the kind that comes when people do not trust the building they work in. Carla lowered her voice. They are your anchor tenant, she said. If you lose them, others will follow. They know the building's weaknesses. They also know when an owner is pretending. Evan swallowed. What do you suggest? He asked. Carla watched him, then spoke carefully. Be present, she said. Fix what you promise. Put it in writing. And when your uncle calls, do not let him rewrite reality for you. He will try. Evan felt a cold line run down his spine. Carla did not know about the letter, not fully, but she had seen Ray's style. They walked into Carla's office on the first floor. She opened a metal filing cabinet and pulled out a folder thick with tabs. She slid it across the desk. Repairs requests, photos, emails, vendor invoices, a ledger printout. Everything I could legally keep, she said. Evan flipped through it. Email threads, dates, delays, approvals. A vendor name repeated more than once. A company he did not recognize. Evan looked up. This vendor, he said. Who are they? Carla's mouth tightened again. That is the one I never liked, she said. They show up on paper more than they show up in the building. Evan's chest tightened. His father's letter had named discrepancies. Carla had saved copies. Ray had approved emergency payments. Evan felt the story shifting. The building was not only an inheritance, it was a battlefield his father had prepared, and Ray had already been fighting on it before Evan even knew it existed. Evan closed the folder and held it against his palm like a weight. He was still scared, but now the fear had a shape and a target. Ray did not wait long to make his move. The email arrived the next morning, calm in tone, polite in structure, and loaded like a legal trap. A meeting had been arranged with a family attorney, neutral, experienced in estate matters. The purpose was to clarify intentions and ensure everyone was protected. Protected. The word made Evan's jaw tighten. The meeting was set for noon at a downtown office that smelled like polished wood and quiet money. Evan walked in carrying a slim folder. Inside were copies of the title documents, his father's letter, and Carla's growing stack of maintenance records. He felt underdressed, underprepared, and exactly where he was supposed to be. Ray was already there, seated comfortably, jacket off, sleeves perfect. Beside him sat a woman in her 40s, with sharp glasses and a calm, evaluating expression. She stood as Evan approached. "Miss Linton," Ray said smoothly. "She specializes in estate conflict resolution." Conflict resolution. Like this was a misunderstanding, not a power grab. They sat. Water glasses were placed in front of them. The room was too quiet, the kind of quiet where every breath felt like testimony. Miss Linton began with a professional tone. She expressed condolences. She spoke about clarity, fairness, minimizing emotional decisions. Evan heard the language and recognized the structure. This was Ray's arena. Calm, logical, controlled. Ray spoke next, voice measured. "My brother loved his son deeply," he said, "but he also worried about him. Evan has struggled with consistency, with follow-through. In his final days, Robert was under heavy medication. We simply want to ensure any major decisions reflect his long-term intentions, not a moment of emotional vulnerability." Evan felt the familiar heat of shame try to climb his neck. He kept his eyes on the table until it passed. Miss Linton turned to Evan. "Do you have documentation of your father's intentions regarding the property?" she asked. Evan slid the title copy across the table. Then the lawyer correspondence, then, carefully, the letter. She read silently. Ray watched her face, not Evan. When she reached the paragraph about discrepancies and private oversight, her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. She looked up. "Your father hired independent counsel 2 years ago," she said. "Yes," Evan replied. Ray leaned back. "Robert was forgetful near the end," Ray said lightly. He could have misunderstood routine maintenance expenses. Evan opened Carla's folder and slid a few printed emails across the table. Vendor approvals, repeated delays. Payments marked urgent with no matching repair completion. Miss Linton adjusted her glasses. "Who managed the property communications?" she asked. Ray answered without hesitation. "I did," he said, "as a favor. My brother trusted me." Evan met his eyes. "Trusted," Evan repeated quietly. Ray held the gaze. "Still does," Ray said. Miss Linton cleared her throat gently. "There appears to be enough documentation here to suggest your brother was acting intentionally and with legal support," she said to Ray. "Challenging capacity would be difficult without medical evidence of impairment at the time of signing." Ray's jaw tightened. "There are hospital records," he said. "Sedatives, pain medication." Miss Linton nodded. "Records exist," she said, "but so do dated legal actions from before hospitalization. That weakens any claim of confusion." Silence settled. Not emotional silence, tactical silence. Ray shifted tactics. "Even if the transfer stands, Evan is not equipped to manage this asset responsibly," he said. "A temporary conservatorship or advisory structure would be in his best interest." Best interest. Evan finally spoke, voice steady, low. "My father wrote that you would say that," he said. Ray's eyes flicked to him just a fraction too sharp. Miss Linton looked between them. Evan continued. "He wrote that you use facts like ropes," he said. "That you make surrender sound like maturity." The words hung in the air. Not dramatic, just precise. Ray's composure did not break, but a thinness entered his voice. "This is not emotional manipulation," Ray said. "This is reality." Evan nodded once. "Then let me face reality," he replied. Miss Linton closed the folder gently. "My recommendation," she said carefully, "is that the transfer stands. Mr. Reed can retain independent legal and financial advisors if he chooses. That would protect him without transferring control. Ray had lost the central lever. He stood slowly. "We are not finished," he said. Evan did not rise. "No," he said. "We are just starting." Ray left without another word. The door shut behind him, softer than it sounded in Evan's chest. Miss Linton looked at Evan. "This will escalate," she said. "Are you prepared for that?" Evan thought of the voicemail, of the letter, of Carla's files. "No," he said honestly, "but I am not leaving." She nodded once. "Then hire your own people," she said, "and document everything." Evan stepped back onto the sidewalk outside the office. The city noise hit him like cold air. Ray had just lost the quiet legal path. That meant he would look for another. The crisis did not wait for Evan to feel ready. It came 3 days later, mid-afternoon, in the form of a panicked call from Carla. "There is water coming through the third-floor ceiling," she said. "A lot." Evan was already in the car before the call ended. By the time he reached the building, a small crowd had gathered in the lobby. Tenants standing with crossed arms, phones out. Faces tight with the kind of anger that comes from feeling ignored too long. Carla met him near the elevator, her expression controlled but urgent. "Pipe burst above the design firm," she said. "We shut off water, but damage is done." They took the stairs. The smell hit him first. Wet drywall. Dust. Paint turning to paste. Water dripped steadily from a sagging patch in the ceiling. Buckets lined the hallway. Inside the design firm's office, papers were stacked on desks to avoid the wet floor. The firm's manager, a woman in her 30s with tired eyes and a sharp voice, walked straight toward Evan. "We were told this building was being fixed," she said. "This is not fixed." Evan nodded. "You are right," he said. "This is not fixed." She blinked, thrown off by the lack of excuses. "We cannot work like this," she said. "Equipment, files, insurance." Evan held her gaze. "We will cover damages," he said. "Temporary workspace if needed. I will get a restoration team here today." She studied him, searching for the usual landlord deflection. "Are you actually the owner?" she asked. "Yes," Evan said. "Then act like it," she replied. Carla was already on the phone with emergency services. Evan turned to the maintenance contractor who had just arrived. "How bad?" Evan asked. The man crouched, touched the ceiling panel, shook his head. "Old pipe," he said. "Corrosion." This was coming for a while. For a while. Evan felt the weight of that. This was not a surprise. It was neglect reaching its deadline. His phone buzzed. "Ray." Evan stared at the screen. He answered. "You heard?" Ray said immediately. "I did." "How?" Evan asked. "Word travels when a building floods," Ray replied. "You are in over your head. Sell before this buries you." Evan looked at the hallway, at Carla moving fast, at tenants watching him. "I am handling it," Evan said. Ray's voice cooled. "Insurance claims, liability, tenant lawsuits, code violations. You do not even know which forms to file. One mistake and they will eat you alive." Evan felt fear spike hard in his chest. "Maybe," he said, "but I am still here." Ray exhaled sharply. "Pride is expensive," Ray said. "So is control," Evan replied, and hung up. His hands were shaking. He shoved them into his pockets, just like in the hospital hallway, but this time he pulled them back out. He walked into the design firm's office. "I need a list of damaged items," he said. "And photos. We will document everything." The manager handed him a clipboard without a word. Evan crouched on the wet carpet and started writing. Model numbers, equipment, estimated values. He did not know if he was doing it right. He only knew disappearing would make it worse. Hours later, the water stopped. Industrial fans hummed. The hallway smelled like damp air and effort. Carla stood beside him. "Most owners send assistants," she said quietly. Evan nodded. "Most owners were not given a second chance like this," he replied. She watched him a moment. "You stayed," she said. Evan looked down the hallway at the damage, the fans, the people still working. "Yeah," he said, "I stayed." And for the first time since his father died, the fear inside him shifted slightly. Not gone, just no longer in charge. The fans were still running when Carla handed Evan the second folder. Not the one with maintenance requests, not the emails. This one was older, thicker. The paper edges worn like it had been opened and closed too many times by someone who was not sure what to do with what they were seeing. "I was not sure if I should show you this," Carla said. "Your father asked me to keep copies. He said if anything ever felt wrong, I should give them to you, not to your uncle." Evan felt a slow cold settle in his chest. He opened the folder. Inside were printed spreadsheets, maintenance logs, vendor invoices, but this time Carla had highlighted lines in yellow. Dates circled, totals underlined, the same vendor name appeared again and again. Northline Facilities. Evan frowned. "They handled emergency work," he said. "That is what the invoices say," Carla replied. She flipped to the next page, photos paperclipped to reports. A ceiling stain dated 6 months after an invoice marked leak fully repaired. A hallway light listed as replaced twice in 1 year, still flickering in the photo. Carla tapped the ledger. "These are payments authorized directly by Ray," she said. "Your father signed some, but not these. See the digital signature? That is Ray's authorization access." Evan stared at the column of numbers. Not huge amounts individually. Just enough to slide past notice. Small drains from a large account. Quiet. "How much total?" he asked. Carla slid a summary page forward. "Over 2 years," she said. "Enough to matter, not enough to scream." Evan leaned back in the chair slowly. "My dad knew," he said. Carla nodded. "He stopped arguing with Ray about it. After that, he told me to send everything to a second email address. I did not know whose it was." Evan swallowed. "It was probably his private lawyer," he said. Carla gave a small nod. That would make sense. Evan looked at the vendor address. "This company," he said. "Do they exist?" Carla hesitated. "On paper, yes," she said. "I called once. No one answered. I drove by the listed address. It is a mailbox store." Evan felt something click into place. His father had not just been worried about Evan's future. He had been preparing for a fight he knew he would not be alive to finish. He pulled out his phone and took photos of every page. "Ray thinks this is about me being irresponsible," Evan said quietly. Carla watched him. "It is about someone else being too comfortable," she replied. Evan closed the folder carefully. "I need a copy of everything," he said. "Digital if possible." Carla gave a tired smile. "Already scanned," she said. "I was hoping someone would ask." Evan stood with the folder under his arm. He did not feel powerful. He felt the weight of responsibility double. The building was not just his inheritance. It was evidence. And evidence meant Ray's calm voice and legal threats were not the whole story. They were part of a cover. Evan stepped into the hallway. Workers were packing up equipment. The building still smelled damp, but there was movement now, repair in progress. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Heard you had water damage. Tough start. If you want out before things get worse, I know someone who would buy fast. Cash. Evan stared at the message. The timing was not coincidence. Ray had lost the lawyer route. Now the pressure shifted. Evan typed back, not interested. 3 dots appeared, then another message. You sure? Because inspections are coming, fire safety, city compliance. That building has issues. Evan did not respond. He looked down the hallway at the patched ceiling, the buckets, the scuffed walls. Yeah, he thought, it has issues. So, do the people trying to scare me out of it? He turned his phone face down and walked back toward Carla's office. I need a forensic accountant, he said. Carla raised an eyebrow. Now you sound like an owner, she replied. The city inspector arrived 2 days later. No warning call, no email, just a clipboard, a badge, and a man who looked like he had already decided what he was going to find. Fire doors, he said. Let us start there. Evan walked with him, heart steady but stomach tight. Carla stayed close, quiet, observant. They checked exit signs. One flickered, noted. They checked extinguishers. One was overdue for service by a month. Noted. They checked stairwell lighting. Dim, noted, none of it catastrophic, all of it real. The inspector wrote steadily. You will receive a notice, he said. Timeline for correction. Failure to comply can result in fines or temporary closure of affected floors. Temporary closure. Evan nodded. Understood, he said. The inspector glanced at him. You took ownership recently, he asked. Yes, Evan said. The inspector paused. Then you inherited more than paperwork, he said. Evan almost smiled. Yeah, he replied. I figured that out. After the inspector left, Evan's phone rang. Ray, Evan answered. Let me guess, Ray said. Fire inspection. You called it in, Evan said. Ray did not deny it. I told you, Ray said calmly. One crisis leads to another. You are not built to manage cascading risk. Evan leaned against the lobby desk. You are trying to scare me into selling, he said. I'm trying to stop you from sinking, Ray replied. There is a difference. Evan thought of the ledger, the fake vendor, the mailbox address. Why do you want this building so badly? Evan asked. Ray was quiet for a moment. Because your father and I built it together, he said finally. I protected it while you were figuring out who you were. Protected, Evan repeated. Ray's tone hardened slightly. You think you found something in those papers, Ray said. You think you understand business now. Let me be clear. If you push this, I will make it public. Your divorce, your job history, your debts. Tenants will not trust a man who cannot manage his own life. There it was. Not legal pressure, reputation pressure. Evan felt the old shame flare, but it did not take control. If you wanted to protect the building, Evan said, you would have fixed the pipes before they burst. Silence. Then Ray spoke, voice colder. You have no idea how expensive stability is, he said. Maybe not, Evan replied, but I know how expensive control is. Ray exhaled sharply. Last offer, he said. I will buy your share at a fair price. You walk away with cash and no headaches. It was tempting. Evan could feel it. The exit door, open, easy, familiar. He thought of the voicemail, of the letter, of the tenants watching him during the flood. No, Evan said. Ray's voice dropped. Then we do this the hard way. The line went dead. Evan stood in the lobby, phone in hand, fluorescent light buzzing above him. Carla watched from across the room. That him? She asked. Yeah, Evan said. She nodded once. Then we better fix everything before the city comes back, she said. Evan looked around the worn lobby, the crooked sign, the scuffed floor. Yeah, he said, we better. Because now the fight was no longer quiet, and Ray had just made it personal. Evan stopped reacting and started planning. That was the first real shift. Until now, he had been answering crises as they came, like someone bailing water out of a boat already leaking. After the fire inspection and Ray's call, he understood something clearly. Ray expected him to drown in chaos. So Evan stopped splashing. He called the forensic accountant that Carla recommended, a quiet man named Malik who listened more than he spoke and took notes with neat, careful handwriting. Evan handed over digital copies of the maintenance ledger, the vendor invoices, the emails Carla had saved. Malik did not react much at first. He asked questions. Dates, account numbers, approval chains. 2 days later, he called Evan back. "This is not sloppy bookkeeping," Malik said. "This is structured." Payments routed through a shell vendor, then transferred again. Someone knew exactly how much they could take without triggering alarms. Evan felt his pulse steady, not spike. Information did that now. It grounded him. "Can we prove it?" Evan asked. Malik paused. "If I get access to the operating account history and the vendor registration trail, yes," he said. "It will not be quick." But yes, Evan gave him everything. Next, he hired a property compliance consultant. Not flashy, not cheap. Someone who knew city code like a second language. They walked to the building, top to bottom, clipboard in hand, marking everything that needed correction before the next inspection cycle. Emergency lights, exit hardware, sprinkler pressure tests, documentation. It was overwhelming. Evan did not run. He made a list. He prioritized. He called contractors himself. At night, when fear crept in and whispered that Ray was right, that this was too much, he replayed the voicemail. He listened to his father's tired voice telling him to stay, so he stayed. A week later, Ray made his mistake. He did not come to Evan, he went to a tenant. The design firm manager called Carla first, then Carla called Evan. "He came by," the manager said, "your uncle. He said he still had decision authority. He warned us the building might be shut down. He said we should prepare to relocate and that he could help us find space in another property he works with." Evan felt a slow burn start in his chest. "Did he put that in writing?" Evan asked. "No," she said, "but he gave me his card." Evan asked her to email a summary of the conversation. Then he called Malik. Then his attorney, the one Miss Linton had recommended. Ray just interfered with active tenants, Evan said. He is representing himself as having authority he does not have. That changes things, the attorney said. They drafted a formal cease and desist letter. It stated clearly that Ray held no legal management role, and that further interference with tenants could be considered tortious interference. A phrase Evan had never heard before, but now understood enough to respect. The letter went out by certified mail and email. Ray called within an hour. "You are making a mistake," Ray said, voice low and tight. "You already did," Evan replied. "You think paper threats scare me?" Ray said. "No," Evan said. "Evidence scares you." Ray hung up. Malik called that evening. "I traced the vendor," he said. "It leads to a holding company. The holding company leads to a trust. The trust lists one trustee, Evan already knew. "Ray," he said. "Yes," Malik confirmed. Evan sat very still after the call ended. His father had not imagined the problem. He had documented it, prepared for it, and handed it to Evan not as revenge, but as responsibility. The next step was not shouting, it was precision. Evan's attorney filed a formal notice requesting financial reconciliation and preservation of records. Not an accusation. A demand for transparency. Ray responded through his own lawyer the next morning. They denied wrongdoing, called it administrative overlap, suggested confusion during Robert's declining health. Evan read the email twice. They were not panicking yet. That meant they had not seen the full file. Good, Evan thought, because he was no longer fighting to prove he was not a failure. He was building a case. The meeting took place in a conference room that smelled like coffee and quiet hostility. Ray arrived with his attorney, a man with a silver watch and a patient smile. Evan sat across the table with his own lawyer and Malik. who carried a slim binder that looked harmless and heavy at the same time. Ray did not look at Evan. "Let us resolve this efficiently," Ray's lawyer began. "We understand there have been misunderstandings about past management." Malik opened the binder. "There is no misunderstanding about bank transfers," he said calmly. He laid out the ledger, highlighted rows, matching dates, cross-referenced vendor registrations. He explained the routing of funds in plain language. Emergency repair payments issued to a vendor that shared a mailing address with a holding company. The holding company controlled by a trust. The trust listing Raymond Reed as trustee. Ray's lawyer's smile thinned. "These are interpretations," he said. Malik slid forward the vendor registration documents. "These are signatures," he replied. Evan watched Ray carefully. Ray did not explode. He did not shout. He went still, the way a man does when his usual tools stop working. "Your brother knew about these discrepancies," Evan's lawyer said. "He hired independent oversight. He transferred the property out of your operational influence. That suggests intent, not confusion." Ray finally spoke. "Robert was sick," he said. "He overreacted." Evan leaned forward. "He documented everything," Evan said. "That is not overreacting, that is preparing." Ray looked at him then, really looked at him, as if still trying to find the weak version of his nephew. "You are going to destroy this family over accounting disagreements," Ray said. Evan shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "You already did that when you treated the building like an account you controlled instead of something you protected." Silence filled the room. Evan's lawyer placed a document on the table. "We are prepared to file for recovery of misallocated funds and seek formal injunctions preventing further interference," she said. "Or we can settle." Ray's lawyer leaned toward him, whispering. Ray's jaw tightened. Finally, Ray spoke, voice clipped. "What does he want?" Evan did not rush his answer. "Full transfer confirmation," he said, "no management claims. Repayment plan for diverted funds, and a written acknowledgement that you hold no authority over the property." Ray stared at him like the request was a personal insult. "You think this makes you a man?" he said quietly. "No," Evan replied. Staying did. The word landed heavier than any accusation. Ray looked away first. They negotiated for 2 hours. Numbers adjusted. Language refined. But the structure stayed. By the time the papers were signed, Ray's authority was gone. Legally, formally, on record. Evan walked out of the building into late afternoon light that felt unreal against his face. His phone buzzed. A message from the design firm manager. "Heard things are getting handled. We are staying." Evan stood on the sidewalk, staring at the words. Not a celebration. Not a victory speech, just staying. The same word his father used. Evan looked up at the skyline, at the building he now owned, not as a burden, not as a trap, but as proof that fear did not get the final vote anymore. He still felt it. But he stayed anyway. Evan did not go to the cemetery right away. For days after the legal papers were signed, he stayed busy on purpose, contractors, compliance checklists, meetings with tenants, calls with Malik, invoices, timelines. Work filled the space where grief waited. Work felt safer because it had steps, and steps felt like progress. But grief does not disappear when ignored. It waits until the noise quiets. It was a Sunday afternoon when the building felt stable enough for Evan to leave without checking his phone every 10 minutes. The hallway lights were steady now. The new exit signs glowed clean and bright. The third-floor ceiling had been replaced, the paint still fresh, the air dry. Carla saw him near the lobby. "Taking a day?" she asked. "Yeah," Evan said. "I owe someone a visit." She nodded, like she understood exactly who that was. The cemetery was quieter than he expected. Wind moved through the trees in a low, steady sound that felt older than everything else. Evan walked slowly between the rows, carrying a small bundle of white flowers he had bought from a grocery store on the way. Nothing dramatic, just real. He stopped in front of the headstone. Robert Reed. The letters looked too formal for the man he remembered. His father had always felt solid, present, like someone who would outlast things simply by standing still. Seeing his name carved into stone felt like a lie that had somehow become permanent. Evan stood there for a while without speaking. His hands were in his jacket pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, the way they used to be when he expected someone to tell him he had done something wrong. "I almost sold it," he said finally. His voice sounded small in the open air. "The building. I sat in the car and thought about just walking away. Cash, no stress, no chance to screw it up." He let out a breath that shook a little. "That is what I always did. When things got big, I got small." The wind moved through the trees again. Evan looked down at the grass near the stone. "Ray was right about some things," he said quietly. "I was not ready. I still am not. Every day I feel like I am guessing." He rubbed a hand over his face, then let it fall. "But I stayed," he said. "I stayed when the pipe burst. I stayed when the inspector showed up. I stayed when he tried to scare me. I stayed when I wanted to run so bad it felt like my chest was tearing." He glanced at the headstone again. "You knew that would be the hard part for me," he said. "Not the money, not the paperwork, just staying." Evan crouched down and placed the flowers at the base of the stone. His fingers lingered on the cool surface for a second. "I thought you looked at me and saw disappointment," he said. "I carried that for years. Every job I lost, every relationship I messed up, I heard your silence and thought it meant I had already failed you." His throat tightened, but he kept going. "Turns out you saw something else. Something I could not see yet." He gave a small, uneven smile. "That is kind of unfair, you know, believing in someone before they believe in themselves. That is a lot of pressure." The smile faded, replaced by something steadier. "But I get it now," he said. "You were not trying to save me from failing. You were trying to make sure I did not run from the chance to grow." Evan stood slowly. His knees cracked, and he almost laughed at the sound. "The building is not fixed yet," he said. "It might never be perfect. Neither am I. But the lights work. The tenants stayed. The money is clean. And Ray cannot pretend he is in charge anymore." He took a deep breath. "I am scared most days," he admitted. "But I am not ashamed of that anymore. Being scared and staying anyway feels different than being scared and disappearing." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of grass and earth. "I do not know if I would have changed without this," Evan said. "Without you forcing my hand. Maybe I would still be arguing in parking garages about things that do not matter." He nodded once, like he was acknowledging a deal that had already been made. "Thank you for not giving up on me," he said. He turned to leave, then paused and looked back at the headstone one more time. "I am staying," he said quietly. "I promise." Evan walked back toward the cemetery gate with slow steps, but they did not feel heavy the way they used to. The fear was still there, living somewhere in his chest. The doubt still whispered sometimes, telling him he could lose everything with one bad decision. But another voice lived there now, too. Stay. If this story reaches you, if you have ever been the one people quietly expected to fail, remember this. Being ready is not what changes your life. Staying does. Staying when it is messy. Staying when you are embarrassed. Staying when you are scared. Because sometimes the only difference between the person everyone doubts and the person who finally grows into themselves is this.